Ladies and gentlemen,
They say the next big thing is here.
the Steve Warneke Show.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the program. Steve Warneke here on the Steve Warneke Show. I know that's hard to guess. Hey, thanks for joining me. This is the first at stevewarneke.com. We are on the iTunes store as well. And a bunch of these podcasts are going to be focused on police work to celebrate the publishing of my first novel, From Boy to Blue, which will be available at Amazon and at stevewarneke.com. Your resident police expert talking about police issues. So, I wanted to start it off with stop and frisk. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Before we do that, I just want you to know I did over 15 years at the Denver Police Department, retired as a sergeant. During that time, I was in patrol majority of the time, but I did do neighborhood policing, field training officer. I was a financial crimes detective, sergeant, certified hostage negotiator, internal affairs investigator, and a supervisor in the media relations department. And this is the new book. Look at this. What do you think of this? All right. Those of you who are listening only, you'll just have to imagine what it looks like. It looks great. I'm just take my word for it. All right, so I think there's a lot of confusion, and the reason why I like to do this is because I was out there for so long. There's a disconnect between people and the police, and I just wanted you to know that it doesn't need to be that way. I think a lot of this is based in misunderstanding, and I hope to create a better relationship between police and citizens, therefore making everybody's next encounter with law enforcement safer. So that's kind of the purpose of all of this. Without any further ado, we're going to move to stop and frisk. There's been a lot of attention on stop and frisk. Recent litigation. It was even brought up in the presidential debates with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And there's just a tremendous amount of misunderstanding going on about stop and frisk. Let me tell you what stop and frisk is not. Because it's such a buzzword now, right? People hear stop and frisk. I don't like that. I don't like it. Nope, don't like it. Shouldn't be able to do that. They think the police just drive by, stop, throw you up against the wall, and start searching you. That's really what people think, and honestly, it is. That's not what's happening. It never has been the case. Never, never, never has that been the case. Police don't get to search you for no reason. They don't get to eeny, meeny, miny, mo, who it is they want to stop. They don't get to do any of that. And that has never, ever been the case. So, because of the buzzwords and people talking about, I don't think stop and frisk is racistly implied, it's only in the ghetto, it shouldn't be done. It's not. Let me tell you what it's not. That's not what it is. You can't just see somebody and go, I wonder how firm their buttocks is. I'm just going to stop and touch it maybe, perhaps. I don't know. You can't do any of that, all right? You've got to have reasons to stop people. And I'm going to talk about later what it actually is. But right now, I want you to know what it's not. It's so ambiguous. And so it's not any of those things. Let me just go with that, all right? That the cops just drive around and they see you, right? And they're like, man, that guy looks like he's up to no good, right? Well, why is that, partner? No reason. Just, I don't like the way he looks. I hate people that wear socks with sandals, damn it. Stop him and see what he's up to, right? Okay, so you can't do any of that. All right, that's not what it is. So just hold on. Slow your roll. Let's calm down for a second. Before I tell you what it is, I want to tell you the problem with the law. The problem with the law is it's so difficult to make any rules about how police should behave. It's not like math or science. Math, 2 + 2 = 4, or if I wanted to show you how smart I was, I could whip out the Pythagorean theorem out of my butt, a² + b² = c², right? All right, so I have all of that stuff. Every time you do that, it works out, right? That's the formula. You just come up, math and science, they have things that you can apply, formulas, theories, whatever, that you can apply to every situation, and it's constant. Not a lot changes. Law is the exact opposite. Law is so difficult to say, you can do this, you can't do this. Why? Because literally every situation, every one of them is different. No two speeding stops are alike. The cars are different. The number of occupants are different. How fast they were going is different. If they were reaching under the seat, if they're fidgety, if they're nervous, if you smell alcohol, if you smell drugs. Is the plate stolen? Is the car stolen? Time of day, neighborhood. There's no two instances in law enforcement that are really the same. And so people in the biz talk about a totality of the circumstances. So when you hear a story on the news and you hear a couple facts, you go, well, that sounds like crap. That's not doesn't sound right. The first thing you ought to take away from this isn't to memorize everything I'm about to teach you, everything I'm about to say, and accept it as absolute gospel. The first thing that should click in your head is, holy crap, these things are so complicated. You know, they're so complicated. Every instance is different. No two are alike. There's so much stuff that goes on that you can't possibly make a rule that says police can detain you. And they can detain you for 5 minutes. They can detain you for 20 minutes. Everything is different. Think about this. If I stop you for possibly being in the area of vehicles that were being broken into, you fit the description vaguely. It's no real cars. I mean, you know, maybe like somebody called it in, said, I think somebody was prowling cars, but you don't even have like a window broken on a car. You're in the area. You match the description. Can I sit you down on the curb and stop you for an hour? No. Can I detain you there? And no, I can't. I don't think that's reasonable. But if you were leaving the Aurora Theater after a mass shooting and you fit the description, we might be able to hold you for an hour because, God forbid, we let that person go into the community when we could have stopped them. So it may take us a little longer. It may be more reasonable to detain somebody for an hour, even while we're investigating to make sure, depending on the severity of the crime. So there's no absolutes here. And those are obviously, you know, different ends of the spectrum. There's a whole bunch of gray area in the middle, even, that makes this even more complicated. So I like to give, you know, easy examples. Then we can, you know, on one end and then another example on the other. Then we can talk about the trillion things that fall in the middle. And those are the ones that are usually controversial between people. So it's so difficult. You can't legislate an exact formula for how long you can detain people, what you can detain people for. It's difficult. That's why the courts come up with things like, would it cause a reasonable person to assume? Well, what does that mean? That's not the Pythagorean theorem. No, it's not. Just reasonable people who have critical thinking skills. Does this pass the smell test? That's what we're asking for. So let's talk about that. There's several different types of stops. The first one is a consensual contact. I could just walk up to you and say, how's your day going? If I'm a policeman and you're a citizen. Okay? You're free to leave. I can't detain you. You could say, I don't want to tell you how my day's going. Go pound sand. All right? Okay, thanks very much. See you later. And it's over. All right, that's just a reasonable, a consensual contact stop. All right, so that's the bare minimum. The police do not, in that instance, have the right to search you. You are not detained. You are free to leave. But believe it or not, some crimes get solved that way. You're in a neighborhood, been lots of break-ins. You start talking to someone, hey man, how's it going? Hey, have you seen anybody around here? And then all of a sudden, as they start answering questions, you're just having this discussion. You can escalate from a consensual contact into where you are being detained. Like a sledge or a crowbar falls out of your jacket pocket while we're talking. That could cause some concern. We've had break-ins in the area. Or someone's Rolex falls out of your pocket with somebody else's driver's license. I know these are ridiculous examples, but that's what I'm saying. Like, that could happen. Sometimes they do. It's called a knock and talk. Police do, where they knock at your door. That's a consensual contact. They don't have enough to get a warrant. They don't have enough to detain you. Sometimes they're like, hey, how's it going? You want to talk to me for a minute? And through your answers and through the police's questions, You escalate the situation to a point where you are detained. So just because it starts off as a consensual contact doesn't mean anything. It could escalate, but that's the first one. Second one, investigatory stop. Reasonable suspicion stop. Would the facts and circumstances lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed by that person? That's it. That's a reasonable suspicion. And it's different in every time. And there's no right formula. Here's some things you could look at. Time of day, clothing, pattern of crime in the area. Does the person fit the description of something that of a crime that just happened or is about to occur? There's all kinds of things. Think about this. If you were behind a building in a strip mall and it's midday, I'm just sitting up against the back of the building having a cigarette, there's no problems, and a police officer drives by, you could just be on a smoke break, nothing. If it's 2 a.m, there's not a business open, you got a bulky jacket on, it's June, you got a ski hat on, or a knit cap on, there's 2 or 3 of you, you're holding a flashlight, okay. I think that could be, we probably ought to stop and talk to you at that point. What are you up to? So these are, again, polar opposite examples, but I'm giving you really clear ones. Now you got to think about the majority of these cases that fall somewhere in the gray area. And officers are having to evaluate these in a moment's time. Am I able to stop this? Is this person enough? Is a bulge in the jacket enough? No. Maybe it is. Depends, right? So when are they allowed? What is the stop and frisk? The stop means they've stopped you. You are not free to leave during an investigatory stop. The stop must be reasonable in duration. I've already given you an example of maybe where 5 minutes would be reasonable and maybe where an hour would be reasonable. So it has to be reasonable in nature, the amount of time you're detained. And if it's required for officer safety purposes, the cop can pat you down to see if you have any weapons. For instance, if I'm investigating you for a crime and you have a heavy jacket on, you have your hands in your pocket. I've even worked with police officers who had suspect stopped. Suspect has his hands in the hoodie front pockets and is holding a gun and shoots through the hoodie and hits one of the officers I worked with in the face. All right, so cops can do a frisk when their safety warrants it during an investigatory stop. So if I've stopped you because I believe a crime has been committed, is being committed, or is about to be committed, and maybe if you're wearing a spandex suit, like a dancer or a mascot or the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia person in the green suit, right? If you're wearing that thing and I can see every little nook and cranny in your body, I'm probably not going to pat you down. The scope is also limited in what I can find. If I find a rock of crack in the coin pocket of your jean pocket during an investigatory stop where I'm looking for weapons, I'm probably not going to be able to use that against you. What if I find a crack pipe? Well, it depends. I said, I was feeling the front pocket to see if there any weapons. It felt like a pocket knife. I pulled it out. It was a crack pipe. All right. That's probably going to be allowed. So there's so much that goes on to this. It's just unbelievable, right? That's my point. And it's necessary for officer safety. An officer shouldn't be required to stand there and talk to investigate a crime while you may or may not have a weapon. He's free to look, or he or she, the officer, should be able to pat you down to make sure that while they're conducting their investigation, they're safe. That's a stop and frisk. If there's anybody out there that doesn't feel that's reasonable, you're probably an anarchist, a cop hater, or one of these people that just absolutely despises authority. You're not going to tell me what to do. Nobody tells me what to do. Nope. Nobody. Nope. There are people that rebel against everybody. What, you think you're better than me, huh? You want to fight about it? This is right. Every time. This is what. But if you're reasonable, and most of you are, the silent majority of you are so reasonable. I love it, but we never hear from you. We hear from everybody else. It's ridiculous. You hear this, you go, well, that sounds reasonable to me, right? So what's all the fuss about? It's because people don't know what they're talking about. Well, stop and frisk is ridiculous. So what brought this all about was a class action lawsuit against the city of New York, the police commissioner at the time, Raymond Kelly, and Mayor Michael Bloomberg, And this was what was brought up during the presidential debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, saying that stop and frisk had been found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. In fact, it has not. The Supreme Court did find in some instances that the police department was using stop and frisk improperly, but they didn't, and no court has ever said stop and frisk is unconstitutional. Why? Because I just explained to you what it is, and anybody who's reasonable would say, God, man, you got to be able to do that. You got to. What other choice do you have? You can't. But yet, you stop people. Here's a takeaway also. Don't, if you have a stop with law enforcement, you can ask things. This is what I would do if you want to know. Is this a consensual stop? Am I free to leave? Am I being detained? Those are questions you can ask. But don't start off, you know what? I heard the Warneke podcast. Let me tell you something right now, right, pal? This is a consensual contact, all right? Now, I know I have a spandex shirt on, so I know you can't touch me right now, okay? That's what because Warneke told me that. So just be careful, because you may not know everything the officer knows. But there's some reasonable questions you can ask. Am I being detained? Am I free to leave? But don't pretend like you know it all, because sometimes the cops know something that you don't when they're talking to you. I mean, we've had people that were leaving an area where shots were just fired from a vehicle, and it's a white Escalade with tinted windows and, black rims, and they're occupied by 3 or 4 people, and you catch a very similar vehicle leading that area, and you stop them and get everybody out at gunpoint. It turns out they weren't involved. That happens occasionally. But what are we supposed to do? Let the vehicle go? No. So occasionally, it's so rare that it's just really not even worth talking about. And if it happens to you, go, well, that sucks. Wrong place, wrong time, right? But just do what you're told, and you'll be able to be dusted off and go home. Okay. So let me talk to you about a couple different cases real quickly that the city of New York found in this class action lawsuit. And I'll give you one example from each spectrum. There was a man on February 27, 2008, said he was walking on a path adjacent to a house in the Bronx, New York. He encountered a basement tenant also where another man who indicated he was locked out of his apartment asked for help because Floyd, the man who's responsible for this lawsuit, his grandmother owned the building. So Floyd goes upstairs to help the locked man, the man who's locked out, by retrieving a spare key, and he retrieves a big ring of keys. There's 7 to 10 keys. He wasn't sure which one was correct for the basement lock. So Floyd and the tenant go back down to the basement apartment door and start trying out various keys. NYPD comes along, go through a neighborhood. They see 2 guys trying multiple keys on a door. They've had lots of break-ins in the area. And so they stop and frisk them. And they stop, and the court found that was a reasonable stop and frisk. And I think we can all agree that probably was. And as it turns out, you're only frisking them till you figure out that Floyd's grandma owns the place, that he went upstairs, that this guy's locked out, that they're trying to figure out which of these 10 keys works on the apartment. Period. Perfect. Stop and frisk. Done. Boom. Done deal. Right? Now you got another guy as part of the stop and frisk who claims that he's sitting on a bench outside of a public housing complex in Harlem, New York. After sitting out there for 10 minutes, he notices uniformed police officers walking through the housing complex. 2 officers supposedly draw their weapons, say, get on the ground, get on the floor. There's been a report that there's a gun around here. Everybody get on the floor. There's lots more to this story, but the bottom line is the court found this was not a reasonable application of stop and frisk because, and I don't know if this is what the cops actually did. This was the allegation of it, and it doesn't matter what the cops did or didn't do. I'm giving you an example where if these facts were true, this doesn't fly, at least in my opinion, as far as stop and frisk. If I'm a cop and I get a call that says, hey, there's a gun somewhere in an apartment complex, I can't just walk through the complex frisking everybody. That's not enough. In my mind, you'd have to we need the guy with the red shirt. A white male, 6'3", wearing a red shirt, last seen having a gun. Okay, then maybe we can stop and frisk the guy who's 6'3", wearing a red shirt. Reasonable. But you couldn't, I don't think, based on just that there's a gun in the complex somewhere, walk around and frisk everybody in the complex. Doesn't hold water, and that's what the court found. So, all right. Just a little bit for you, and I hope the takeaway from this, by the way, is that this is just super complicated, that you need to know more. When you hear these police stories on the news, Your first reaction should be, I need a little bit more information because I know I just didn't get it in that 2-minute package. It's not the media's fault, but they got a job to do. They got to tell a story quickly and then move on. So and if it interests you, just find out a little bit more. All right, we're going to have more to come at stevewarneke.com and at iTunes. I am Steve Warneke. Thanks for listening to the show. By the way, pick up your copy of From Boy to Blue, Becoming One of America's Finest. That is my book that I just published, available to Amazon and on my website. I really appreciate it. I look forward to talking to and interacting with lots of you coming up here in the near future. Other than that, we'll be over at stevewarneke.com. All right, kids, thanks very much. Have a good one. Talk to you soon.